Biological.
Hello ladies and gents, today we're going to be analysing the Darwinian theory, or at least some parts of it anyway, and really focusing upon what is said by this gentleman here. This is Richard Dawkins, an evolutionary zoologist and a Darwinist through and through. I'm assuming you know what a Darwinist is by now, but if you're viewing this and you don't know, let me just give you a brief summarisation. A Darwinist is somebody who appeals to the ideology formulated by Darwin. To be brief, the theory states that all life shares a single common ancestor and that life has evolved out of another precursor-like form. Well, that's the short of it. Anyway, here we have Richard Dawkins, who is about to explain the gist of his Darwinian theory in his new book, which he has authored himself. Please pay attention to what he says, because we're about to be analysing the theory in conjunction with actual science in just one moment. So here we go.
This is from my latest book, which is being published, I think, in 3 days' time, The Magic of Reality. And what we're looking at here is a thought experiment in which the reader is invited to take a photograph of herself, an ordinary picture postcard, place it on a table, then take a photograph of her father, father's father, father's father's father, you can do it mother, whichever you like, and then go on and go on and go on, stacking these photographs into an ever higher pile. And I arbitrarily decided that the pile should stop after 185 million generations. So we've got 185 picture postcards, photographs of your ancestors stacked on top of each other. That's about 40, I think I worked out, New York skyscrapers. No, I think it's even more than that. Then I imagine tilting it on its side. And so what you're seeing there is the stack of pictures tilted on its side. And you wander along this, this great long bookshelf full of pictures, every now and again pulling one off. And the ones you see there are an archaic Homo sapiens and then a Homo erectus, which would have been our ancestor about 1.5 million years ago. What's interesting is that I asked the question, who was the first person? That's the title of the chapter. Every chapter in the book is a question, and every chapter in the book begins with a set of mythical answers, and then the true answer, the scientific answer. So who really was the first person? And I begin with a slightly paradoxical answer, that there never was a first person. Because every animal, every person ever born belonged to the same species as its parents. You can take that back as far as you like, and I take it back to 185 million generations ago. You turn over the page and you reveal that your 185 million great-grandfather was a fish.
Do we have a picture of a fish here?
It might even be there. And at first sight, it sounds paradoxical to say that your 185 million great-grandfather was a fish, but on the other hand, every single generation on the way back there belonged to there it is, yes, belonged to the same species as its parents and as its children. The point is, of course, that the whole process is incredibly gradual, incredibly slow. It takes millions of years.
Okay, so Richard is trying to promote this idea that we all evolved from a fish. Now notice the fish which he has chosen here is a mosaic animal, meaning it shares characteristics of other creatures despite being of its own class. Here is Dr. Mark Surtees to explain to us what a mosaic creature is. Now Dr. Mark Surtees is a zoologist also, so let's listen to what he has to say.
Okay, let's talk about mosaics. We find creatures in the fossil record which are actually mosaics. What do I mean by mosaic? It's a mixture of characters. So you have creatures that have representing characters from, for example, reptiles and birds, or mammals and reptiles. For example, Archaeopteryx is a mosaic. Archaeopteryx looks in many ways like a reptile, and it also has feathers. It also has a respiratory system that looks like a bird's respiratory system, and a brain that looks like a bird's brain. We have Tiktaalik, which is a special type of fish, which is actually is a very odd fish, and it has features which look like something else. There's a combination. We have them today as well. They still live. These mosaics still live. We have the platypus is perhaps the best example. With the duck-billed platypus, it's got characteristics of it lays an egg like a reptile. It's a mammal. It has venom also like a reptile. It has a bill that looks like a duck. It's a mosaic creature. The red panda is another one. Is a mosaic creature. The red panda is not really a bear. It's not really a panda. It's not really. It doesn't really fit in an easy class. So we get mosaics. We've got creatures which are combinations of characters, but not combinations of changing characters. Now, if Archaeopteryx was a true transitional feature, a true transitional creature, it would have feathers evolving, not completely functional feathers, which is what it has. It would have lungs that are changing into the bird-like system from a reptile-like system. It doesn't. It has a bird-like system. So it's a patchwork of characters, but each character is complete and perfect. It's not on the way to becoming anything. Whereas a transitional fossil would show gradual change, or transitional fossils will show gradual change from one type to another. And we'll look at some of that a bit later. But let's just talk about the fishapod. My favourite mosaic creature, I suppose, is this one, Tiktaalik. And it's a fish with strong pectoral, otherwise front fins. And it's able to breathe, apparently able to breathe air. We don't know for sure because we don't see it, but we expect it could breathe air. But we still have fishapods today. Here's one. It's a mud skipper. It's a strong pectoral fins. It can crawl around on land. It can move quite quickly, quite difficult to catch, and it can breathe air. A very strange fish. And we have another one called the bishir, which is in Africa, which is a very strange fish as well, which is similar. Can also crawl out onto land and survive for a certain amount of time on land and crawl with its front fins. Very similar to the fossil Tiktaalik. And this was a fishapod. It's a mosaic creature, and I would suggest to you it's actually not a transitional creature.
And you can watch that full lecture if you click here, but stay tuned for just one moment. Remember, Richard Dawkins is trying to promote this idea that we emerged from a fishapod, which, as you just heard, is a mosaic creature and not a transitional creature at all. Remember Richard Dawkins saying just a few moments ago that he applied an arbitrary 150 million generations which took us from this fish to where we are today as humans.
And I arbitrarily decided that the pile should stop after 185 million generations.
So let's play along. Let's assume he is right and that we did evolve from a fish, just for this moment at least. So let's do a quick calculation. As a living organism, the mud skipper is a prime model organism because it's still alive today. The mud skipper has on average 25 offspring per generation, so 25 times 158 million gives you 4,625,000,000 intermediate stages that we should find if Richard Dawkins' theory is correct. The only problem is, however, is that there are no transitional fossils whatsoever, as you will now hear Richard Dawkins himself explain.
It's a kind of fortunate accident that all the intermediates are extinct, which is why we can divide the living kingdoms into separate species which can't interbreed with each other.
Now that was very quick by anyone's standards, so let me just play it to you one more time. Listen carefully.
It's a kind of fortunate accident that all the intermediates are extinct, which is why we can divide the living kingdoms into separate species which can't interbreed with each other.
No. The real reason why they cannot interbreed is because they are of complete different families. In the fossil record we find early high disparity. That's the Barman groups. Some of these creatures in these high disparity groups have gone extinct, but what has survived extinction has seen high variation and divergence. Folks, this is exactly what the Bible says, that God created different groups daily, and he instructed them to go forth and multiply. What Richard Dawkins is trying to sell you is nonsense. This is anti-science. But wait, you say. Why would he lie about the data? Well, isn't it obvious? The implications drawn out by the data supporting the early high disparity model and in tow with the genetic and fossil record only supports a biblical explanation of events. But why would Mr. Dawkins be so anti the science which supports the Bible, you ask? Because Mr. Dawkins is an atheist, which means he lacks all knowledge of God and so has chosen to deny God's existence. Ladies and gents, if you like what you've just seen, please check out some of my other videos here below, and remember to click subscribe. Cheers and take care. Biological.